The scent of sage and honey drifted through the makeshift camp, just as Dustin Yates thought he might actually die of hunger. His stomach so hollow it felt like his backbone had made acquaintance with his navel after 3 days of riding through Montana territory with nothing but hardtack and jerky so tough it could roll a boot. He had been tracking a horse thief for the better part of a week, following cold trails and dead ends until his supplies ran thin and his hope ran thinner. And now, as the September sun of 1878 began its descent beyond the mountains, he caught that smell on the wind and knew salvation when it presented itself. The aroma led him to a small clearing where a woman stood over a Dutch oven, her blonde hair catching the last golden rays of daylight, her calico dress dusty from travel but her movements as graceful as a dancer's as she stirred whatever heaven she was creating in that cast iron pot. Dustin dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her, his hand deliberately away from his pistol to show he meant no harm. She turned at the sound of his boots on the pine needles, and he found himself looking into eyes the color of summer cornflowers, wide with surprise but not fear. There was something determined in the set of her jaw, something resilient in the way she held herself, and he recognized immediately that this was not some helpless woman waiting for rescue, but someone who had carved out her own path through this wild country. "Madam," he said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest, "I don't mean to intrude, but I have been riding for days with nothing proper to eat, and I would be mighty grateful if you could spare even a small portion of whatever you are cooking there. I can pay or work for it or trade supplies if you need anything." She studied him for a long moment, those blue eyes taking in his dusty clothes, his hollow cheeks, the star pinned to his vest that marked him as a lawman. Then something softened in her expression, and she nodded once. "I cannot turn away a hungry man, especially not one who serves the law. Sit yourself down by the fire. This stew will be ready in just a few minutes." He sank onto a fallen log she had positioned near the flames, suddenly aware of just how bone-tired he truly was. As she moved around the small camp, gathering a tin plate and spoon, he noticed the efficiency of her movements, the way everything had its place despite the temporary nature of the setup. A covered wagon stood nearby, its canvas weathered but intact, with Catherine Bryant painted in neat letters on the side panel along with fine cooking and catering services. "You are traveling alone?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. Montana Territory in 1878 was no place for a woman on her own, not with outlaws and hostile encounters still common enough to keep most folks traveling in groups. "I am," she said simply, ladling a generous portion of stew onto the plate. "I had been cooking at a restaurant in Virginia City, but the owner sold the business to his nephew who had his own ideas about how things should be run. I decided to head north to Bozeman, where I heard there was need for someone with my skills. Been on the road for 4 days now." She handed him the plate, and when he looked down at it, he felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. Chunks of venison swam in a rich gravy thick with carrots, potatoes, and onions, the steam rising up to carry that intoxicating scent directly to every starved cell in his body. He lifted a spoonful to his lips, blew on it gently, and took a bite. The flavors exploded across his tongue with such intensity that he actually felt moisture spring to his eyes. It was not just that he was hungry, though that certainly sharpened his appreciation. It was that this was genuinely the finest stew he had ever tasted, perfectly seasoned with herbs he could not quite identify, the meat so tender it fell apart at the touch of his spoon, the vegetables cooked just enough to be soft, but not mushy. He had eaten in restaurants from San Francisco to Kansas City, had enjoyed his mother's cooking all through his childhood, had sampled trail food from dozens of different cooks, but nothing had ever compared to this. "Madam," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "this is extraordinary." I mean that sincerely. I have never tasted anything so good in all my 32 years. A smile transformed her face, lighting it from within, and he realized she was even prettier than he had first thought. Thank you, Marshall. That is kind of you to say. Cooking is my passion, the thing I do better than anything else in this world. I take pride in feeding people well. Where did you learn to cook like this? He took another bite, then another, unable to help himself. Each mouthful was like a revelation. She settled herself on another log across the fire from him, her own smaller portion balanced on her knee. My mother taught me the basics when I was just a girl back in Ohio. She came from a long line of German cooks, and she knew things about spices and flavors that most American cooks never consider. Then when I was 18, I got a job working in the kitchen of a fine hotel in Cincinnati, and the head chef, there was a man who had trained in New York. He taught me technique, how to really understand what I was doing instead of just following recipes. After that, I worked in restaurant kitchens in 4 different cities, learning something new in each place. How old are you now, if you do not mind my asking? 25 this past June. And you said you were 32, he nodded, scraping the last drops of gravy from his plate with the spoon, wishing there was more but too polite to ask. She noticed his reluctance to stop eating and smiled again. There is plenty more. I made enough for several meals. Please, help yourself to another serving. He did not need to be asked twice. As he filled his plate again, she continued talking, telling him about her journey west, how she had left Ohio after her parents died in a fever outbreak, how she had worked her way across the country one kitchen at a time, always moving, always seeking something she could not quite name. He listened while he ate, and with each word she spoke, he felt increasingly drawn to this remarkable woman who faced the world with such courage and grace. When he finally finished his second helping, full for the first time in days, he leaned back and sighed with deep satisfaction. Miss Bryant, that was the best meal I have eaten in my entire life. You have a genuine gift, and I hope Bozeman appreciates what is coming their way. Thank you, Marshall Yates. She had noticed his name from the wanted posters in his saddlebag, visible when he had unsaddled his horse. Now tell me, what brings you out here alone and half-starved? Surely a lawman should have better supplies than what left you in such a state. He explained about the horse thief, about the chase that had gone far longer than expected, about running out of decent food and being too focused on the pursuit to stop and hunt properly. I lost his trail yesterday near the Gallatin River. I was heading back toward Bozeman to resupply and report the situation when I caught the smell of your cooking. It was like a miracle. You are headed to Bozeman as well then. Her eyes brightened with interest. Perhaps we could travel together. I would feel safer with a lawman as company, and you would benefit from my cooking. It seems like an arrangement that would serve us both well. Dustin considered this. His original plan had been to ride hard and reach town by tomorrow evening, but that was before he had met Catherine Bryant. Now the idea of spending more time with her, of sharing more meals and conversations, seemed infinitely preferable to riding alone. I think that is an excellent idea, Miss Bryant. If you are comfortable starting out at first light, we could make Bozeman in 2 days of easy travel. First light it is then. She stood and began gathering the dishes. I have coffee if you would like some, and there are biscuits left from breakfast. You had me at coffee. He grinned and she laughed, the sound light and musical in the growing darkness. They sat by the fire for another hour, drinking strong coffee and talking about everything and nothing. She told him about the dishes she hoped to create, the restaurant she dreamed of opening someday where she could cook exactly what she wanted without anyone telling her to make things simpler or cheaper. He told her about growing up on a ranch outside Denver, about losing his father to a riding accident and his older brother to the war, about becoming a marshal because he wanted to bring some order to the chaos of the frontier. When exhaustion finally pulled at them both, she retreated to her wagon, and he rolled out his bedroll on the opposite side of the fire, the proper distance for respectability. But as he lay there looking up at the stars through the pine branches, he found himself thinking not about horse thieves or his empty stomach, but about cornflower blue eyes, and the way her face lit up when she talked about cooking. He woke before dawn to the smell of bacon frying and coffee percolating. Catherine was already up, her hair neatly braided, a fresh apron tied over her dress as she worked at the fire. "Good morning, Marshal. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," he admitted, rolling up his bedding. "And please call me Dustin. Marshal Yates makes me sound like my grandfather. Then you must call me Catherine." She flipped the bacon with practiced ease. "Or Kate, if you prefer. Most of my friends use Kate. Kate suits you." He moved to help her, but she waved him away. "You handle your marshal duties, and I will handle the cooking. We each have our expertise." She was assembling something on a tin plate, and when she handed it to him a few minutes later, he stared down at what might have been the most perfect breakfast he had ever seen. Fluffy scrambled eggs mixed with cheese and bits of bacon, golden brown biscuits split and buttered, and thin slices of fried potatoes seasoned with something that made his mouth water just from the smell. He sat down on the log and took his first bite of the eggs. They were creamy and rich, perfectly seasoned, neither too dry nor too wet. The biscuits were light as air, the butter soaking into every flaky layer. The potatoes had a crispy exterior and a tender interior, with just a hint of spice that made them addictive. "Kate," he said seriously, setting down his fork to meet her eyes, "you could make a starving man cry with joy. This is beyond anything I have ever experienced. How do you do this?" She blushed slightly, clearly pleased by his genuine appreciation. "I pay attention. I think about what each ingredient needs, how long to cook it, what will enhance the natural flavors instead of masking them. And I cook with care, with love even. Food tastes better when it is made by someone who truly cares about the result. It shows." He returned to eating, determined to savor every single bite but also unable to slow down because it was so delicious. "I meant what I said. This could make a man cry." They broke camp efficiently after breakfast, Kate securing everything in her wagon while Dustin checked the wheels and harness, making sure everything was sound for travel. Her mule, a sturdy gray animal named Horace, seemed well cared for and patient as Dustin adjusted the traces. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, following the trail north toward Bozeman. The September weather was perfect for travel, cool enough in the mornings to be comfortable but warming to pleasant temperatures by midday. They rode side by side when the trail allowed it, Dustin on his buckskin gelding and Kate on the wagon seat, and they talked constantly. He found himself telling her things he rarely shared with anyone, about his doubts regarding his work as a marshal, about whether he was actually making a difference or just chasing his tail across Montana territory. She listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that made him examine his own motivations more carefully. In turn, she shared her own uncertainties. "Sometimes I wonder if I am chasing an impossible dream," she admitted as they stopped to water the animals at a creek around midday. "Opening my own restaurant requires money I do not have, and finding investors who will take a woman seriously is nearly impossible. But I cannot imagine doing anything else with my life. Cooking is not just what I do, it is who I am." "Then you will find a way," Dustin said with conviction. "Anyone who tastes your food will understand that you are worth investing in. You just need the right opportunity." She smiled at him, and he felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. He was falling for her, he realized. falling hard and fast in a way he had never experienced before. It was not just her beauty, though she was certainly lovely. It was her passion, her courage, her refusal to let the world tell her what she could not do. It was the care she put into everything she touched, and the way she made him feel truly seen when she looked at him. They made camp that evening near a stand of aspens turning gold with the season, and Kate prepared venison steaks with roasted root vegetables, and a pan bread that she cooked in a skillet over the fire. Dustin ate slowly this time, wanting to make the experience last, savoring each perfectly seasoned bite. The steak was seared on the outside and tender within, the vegetables caramelized and sweet, the bread crispy and buttery. He told her again how amazing it was, and she laughed. "You are going to spoil me with all these compliments. I might start to believe I am actually as good as you say." "You are better," he insisted. "Kate, I am serious when I say I have never eaten like this. You could be cooking in the finest restaurants in San Francisco or New York. The fact that you are out here in a wagon in Montana territory seems almost criminal. Maybe Montana territory is exactly where I am supposed to be." She met his eyes across the fire, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection growing with every passing hour. That night, Dustin lay awake longer than he should have, thinking about the woman sleeping in the wagon 20 feet away. He had known her for barely more than a day, but it felt like much longer. There was an ease between them, a natural compatibility that he had never found with anyone else. He thought about asking her to dinner when they reached Bozeman, about courting her properly if she was willing, about what it might be like to come home to her cooking every night for the rest of his life. The thought should have terrified him. He had always been cautious about romance, having seen too many hasty marriages fall apart on the frontier. But with Kate, caution seemed unnecessary. Everything about this felt right in a way he could not explain but did not question. They reached Bozeman late the following afternoon, riding into town past fields where cattle grazed and farms showed the results of a good growing season. Bozeman had grown considerably in the past few years, its location making it an important supply point for miners and ranchers throughout the region. Main Street featured false-fronted buildings housing everything from dry goods stores to saloons, and people moved along the boardwalks with the purposeful energy of a town that believed in its future. Dustin helped Kate find a spot to park her wagon at the livery stable, negotiating a good weekly rate while she saw to Horace's comfort. Then he walked with her to the hotel, carrying her carpet bag, despite her protests that she could manage fine on her own. "I know you can manage," he said. "But I want to help. Let me do this small thing." She relented with a smile, and at the hotel desk, Dustin paid for her room for 3 nights before she could object. "Consider it repayment for the best meals of my life," he said when she tried to refuse. "You fed me and probably saved me from a very uncomfortable few days of continued hunger. This is the least I can do." The hotel clerk, an older woman named Mrs. Henderson, looked between them with knowing eyes. "You folks newlyweds. We have a nicer room on the 2nd floor if you want something special." "Oh, we are not married," Kate said quickly, her cheeks coloring. "We just traveled together from Virginia City." "Separate rooms," Dustin added, though he found himself wishing the assumption were true. "Miss Bryant is a professional cook looking for opportunities in Bozeman." Mrs. Henderson's demeanor shifted immediately from romantic interest to business opportunity. "A cook, you say? Can you actually cook, or are you just mediocre like most?" Kate drew herself up, meeting the older woman's challenging gaze steadily. "I can cook better than anyone you have ever met, Mrs. Henderson. That is not arrogance. That is simply fact. Big words." But Mrs. Henderson looked intrigued. "Tell you what. My cook quit last week to get married and moved to Helena. I have been doing the cooking myself, and I am terrible at it. My guests are starting to complain. You make me dinner tonight, something impressive, and if it is as good as you claim, I will hire you to run my kitchen. Room and board included, plus wages. Kate glanced at Dustin, and he nodded encouragingly. I will need to get some supplies from my wagon, she said, and access to your kitchen immediately. Done. Mrs. Henderson pulled a key from the board behind her. Martha will show you to the kitchen. Dinner is served at 6 o'clock. We have 12 guests staying tonight, plus you and the marshal if you want to join us. We will be there, Dustin assured her. He helped Kate bring supplies from her wagon, carrying crates of vegetables and bundles of herbs, while she selected what she needed with the focused intensity of a general planning a campaign. The hotel kitchen was larger than the spaces she had been working with on the trail, with a good iron stove and plenty of counter space. She tied on her apron and immediately began assessing what was available, her hands moving with confident precision as she sorted through the pantry and cold storage. I should let you work, Dustin said, reluctant to leave but knowing he would only be in the way. I need to report in at the marshal's office anyway and file my reports about the horse thief situation. Go. She was already chopping onions with remarkable speed. I will see you at dinner, and Dustin, thank you for everything. I know we only just met, but you have been kinder to me than almost anyone I have encountered in my travels. He wanted to kiss her. The impulse struck him with surprising force, but he restrained himself. Too soon, too presumptuous, despite the connection he felt. Instead, he just smiled. It has been my genuine pleasure, Kate. I will see you at 6. The marshal's office was a sturdy brick building near the center of town, and the marshal himself, a grizzled man named Tom Garrett, greeted Dustin with a firm handshake. Yates, glad you made it back. Any luck with that horse thief? Dustin gave his report, detailing where he had tracked the man and where the trail had gone cold. Garrett listened carefully, making notes, then leaned back in his chair. Well, you gave it a good effort. These things happen. At least the rancher can claim the loss with his insurance now that we have an official report. You planning to head back to Virginia City soon? Actually, I was thinking I might stay in Bozeman for a while. The words surprised Dustin even as he said them, but once they were out, he knew they were true. Unless you need me back there urgently. Garrett studied him with shrewd eyes. This have anything to do with the pretty blonde cook I saw you walking with earlier? Maybe. Dustin could not help but smile. She is remarkable, Tom. Not just pretty, though she certainly is that. She is talented and brave and passionate about what she does. I have known her less than 3 days, but I feel something I have never felt before. Then stay. Garrett waved a hand. We could use another lawman in Bozeman anyway. Town is growing fast, and Sheriff Davis has been complaining he is short-handed. I will wire the main office and get you temporarily reassigned. Give yourself time to see where this goes. Thank you. Dustin felt relief wash over him. I appreciate that more than you know. He found a room at a different hotel, not wanting to seem presumptuous by staying where Kate worked, then cleaned up properly for the first time in days, shaving carefully and putting on his best shirt. When he arrived back at Kate's hotel at precisely 6 o'clock, the dining room was already filling with guests drawn by the aromas wafting from the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson greeted him at the door, her previously skeptical expression transformed into something close to awe. Marshal, I do not know where you found that woman, but she is a miracle. The smells alone have had people asking what is for dinner since 4 o'clock. Kate emerged from the kitchen carrying a large platter, and Dustin felt his breath catch. She had changed into a clean dress, deep green that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pinned up in a style that showed off the elegant line of her neck. But it was the expression on her face that truly captivated him, the look of complete confidence and joy that came from doing exactly what she was meant to do. The meal she served that evening became legendary in Bozeman. She had prepared roasted chicken with herbs and lemon, the skin crackling crispy and the meat succulent and tender. Alongside it came whipped potatoes enriched with butter and cream, green beans cooked with bacon and onions until they were tender but still had texture, fresh bread rolls that steamed when broken open, and a rich gravy that tied everything together. For dessert, she had somehow managed to produce an apple pie with a crust so flaky it practically dissolved on the tongue, the filling perfectly spiced and not too sweet. Dustin ate every bite on his plate, as did every other guest in the dining room. People who normally ate quickly and left were lingering over their meals, savoring each forkful, some of them actually closing their eyes in pleasure. He saw one weathered rancher actually wipe moisture from his eyes after finishing his chicken, and when Kate came out to check on the diners, the man grabbed her hand and said hoarsely, "Madam, that is the finest meal I have had since my mother died 20 years ago. You have a gift from God himself." Kate blushed at the praise but accepted it graciously, and Dustin felt pride swell in his chest as if her accomplishment were somehow his own. When the other guests finally departed, some of them already asking what tomorrow's menu would include, Dustin remained at his table, and Kate joined him with a cup of coffee, sinking into the chair with a sigh of exhaustion and satisfaction. "You were magnificent," he told her sincerely. "Every person in this room tonight experienced something special because of you." "It felt good," she admitted. "This is what I love, feeding people, seeing them enjoy what I create. Mrs. Henderson has already offered me the job permanently, with a very fair wage and complete control over the menu and ordering." "That is wonderful news." It was wonderful, except for the small part of his heart that wondered what this meant for them. If she was settled here, happy and successful, would she still be interested in spending time with a lawman who worked irregular hours and faced danger regularly? "You deserve this opportunity." "I do," she agreed. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "But I want you to know that the job is not the only good thing that has happened to me in the past few days. Meeting you, Dustin, that matters too. A great deal, actually." His hand turned under hers, fingers interlacing. "I feel the same way. I have already arranged to stay in Bozeman for a while. Marshal Garrett is transferring me temporarily to help out the local sheriff. If that is all right with you, I would very much like to court you properly, Kate." Her smile was radiant. "I would like that very much." Over the following weeks, Dustin became a regular fixture at the hotel dining room, eating every single meal Kate prepared and marveling each time at her skill. She never repeated a menu exactly, always trying new combinations, adjusting recipes based on what was freshest at the market, pushing herself to be even better. And it worked. Word spread quickly through Bozeman and the surrounding ranches about the extraordinary cook at Mrs. Henderson's hotel. People began coming to town specifically to eat her meals, and the hotel had to expand its dining room to accommodate the demand. Dustin courted Kate with the same dedication she brought to her cooking. He brought her flowers from the market every few days, walked with her in the evenings after the dinner service was complete, took her on picnics on his days off where, ironically, she still insisted on preparing elaborate meals that made the simple act of eating outdoors feel like a grand occasion. They talked for hours about everything, discovering shared values and compatible dreams, learning each other's histories and hopes. He learned that she had been briefly engaged once, back in Ohio, to a man who had wanted her to give up her dreams of cooking professionally and simply be a housewife. She had broken the engagement despite the scandal it caused, choosing her passion over convention. He told her about a woman he had courted in Denver who had ultimately chosen a banker over a lawman, wanting security more than romance. They had both been hurt, both learned to be cautious, but with each other, caution seemed to dissolve naturally. One evening in late October, as golden leaves swirled down Main Street and the air carried the first real bite of coming winter, Dustin helped Kate close up the kitchen after the dinner service. She had made pot roast that night, the beef so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork, surrounded by vegetables that had absorbed all the rich flavors of the braising liquid. He had eaten until he was uncomfortably full, unable to stop himself even when his stomach protested. "You spoil me," he said, helping her wash the last of the pots. "I am going to get fat eating your cooking every day. You work hard enough to burn it off." She dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Dustin, I need to tell you something." His heart jumped with sudden fear. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually, and that scares me a little." She took a breath. "I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since that first night when you looked at my stew like it was the answer to all life's questions. And I need to know if you feel the same way, or if I am just being foolish." Relief and joy flooded through him. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and took her face gently between his hands. "Kate, I fell in love with you that same night. Maybe the moment you handed me that first plate of stew, maybe when you laughed at something I said, I do not know exactly when, but I love you completely. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life eating your cooking and making you happy." She laughed, though tears sparkled in her eyes. "That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, even if it is partially about food." "With you, food is love," he said seriously. "I see it in every meal you prepare, the care you take, the joy you create. You feed people's souls as much as their bodies. How could I not fall in love with that? How could I not fall in love with you?" He kissed her then, finally, after weeks of restraint and proper courting. Her lips were soft and warm, and she kissed him back with enthusiasm, her arms wrapping around his neck to pull him closer. They stood there in the hotel kitchen surrounded by the lingering aromas of dinner, and Dustin thought he had never been happier in his entire life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kate smiled up at him. "So what happens now? Now I do this properly." He took her hand and led her out of the kitchen to the dining room, where he pulled out a chair for her at one of the tables. Then he knelt on one knee beside her, reaching into his vest pocket for the small box he had been carrying for the past week, waiting for the right moment. "Catherine Bryant," he said formally, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Will you marry me? I know we have only known each other a short time, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, and I want to build a life with you here in Bozeman or wherever your dreams take you. I want to come home to your cooking every night and wake up beside you every morning. I want to support your ambitions and share your joys and face whatever challenges come our way together. Please say yes." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling so broadly he could see every tooth. "Yes, yes, of course, yes. I love you, Dustin, and I want all of those things too." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her again while she laughed and cried simultaneously. Mrs. Henderson, who had been unabashedly eavesdropping from the hallway, burst into the room clapping her hands and declaring it was the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed in her hotel. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at Bozeman's small church, with Marshall Garrett standing as best man and Mrs. Henderson acting as Kate's attendant. Half the town showed up, many of them motivated as much by the knowledge that Kate was preparing the wedding feast herself as by any desire to witness the ceremony. But Dustin did not care about their motivations. All he cared about was Kate standing beside him in a cream-colored dress, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her life. The wedding dinner was held at the hotel, and Kate had spent 3 days preparing a feast that became legendary throughout Montana Territory. There was roasted beef and glazed ham, scalloped potatoes and creamed corn, fresh bread and honey butter, salads made with late-season greens, and desserts that included 3 different kinds of pie plus a cake frosted with real buttercream. Dustin ate until he thought he might burst, and when he told Kate for perhaps the 100th time that her cooking could make a starving man cry with joy, she kissed him and said that was the goal, to create food so good it moved people to tears. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, close enough to walk to the hotel but far enough to feel like their own private sanctuary. Kate continued working at the hotel, but on a schedule that allowed her evenings and Sundays free. Dustin worked as a deputy for Sheriff Davis, handling everything from resolving disputes between ranchers to tracking down the occasional outlaw who thought Bozeman would be an easy target. Their life settled into a comfortable rhythm, punctuated by moments of pure joy. Dustin continued to eat every meal Kate prepared like it was the best thing he had ever tasted, because it usually was. She experimented constantly, trying new recipes and techniques, and he was her willing taste tester, offering honest feedback but mostly just expressing genuine amazement at her talent. On their first anniversary, Kate revealed that she was pregnant. Dustin lifted her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing with delight. Their son was born in August of 1880, a healthy baby boy they named Daniel after Dustin's father. Kate took a brief break from the hotel kitchen, but even during those weeks at home, she cooked constantly, preparing meals for new mothers in town, for the church socials, for anyone who needed feeding. Cooking was in her blood, Dustin realized, not just a job but an essential part of who she was. Little Daniel grew quickly, a cheerful baby who loved watching his mother work in the kitchen. By the time he was 2, he was standing on a stool beside her, helping stir batter and knead dough with his chubby hands. Kate taught him the way her mother had taught her, with patience and love, and Dustin watched them together with a heart so full he sometimes felt it might overflow. In 1882, Kate's dream finally became reality. A wealthy mine owner who had eaten at Mrs. Henderson's hotel offered to invest in Kate's own restaurant. After careful consideration and long discussions with Dustin, she agreed. They found a perfect location on Main Street, a building with a large kitchen and dining space for 40 people. Kate named it the Golden Table, and from the day it opened, it was clear that Bozeman had something special. Kate designed every aspect of the restaurant herself, from the menu to the decor to the training of her small staff. She insisted on using the freshest ingredients, building relationships with local farmers and ranchers to ensure quality. The menu changed with the seasons, featuring whatever was best at any given time. And she maintained the same standard of excellence she had always held, refusing to compromise on quality or care. Dustin helped however he could, handling the business aspects that Kate found tedious, managing accounts and supplies while she focused on the creative work she loved. On his days off, he could often be found at a corner table in the restaurant, eating whatever Kate had prepared that day and telling anyone who would listen that his wife's cooking could make a starving man cry with joy. The restaurant thrived. People came from surrounding towns and territories to eat at the Golden Table, and travel writers began including it in their guides to Montana. Kate's reputation grew until she was recognized as one of the finest cooks in the entire Western Territories. But success did not change her. She remained humble and hardworking, still finding the greatest satisfaction in seeing people enjoy her food. Their daughter Elizabeth was born in 1883, a tiny thing with her mother's blonde hair and her father's serious eyes. Kate juggled motherhood and running the restaurant with the same grace she brought to everything, and Dustin supported her however he could, caring for the children when she needed to work, hiring help when necessary, making sure she knew that her dreams mattered as much as his. By 1885, they had the life Dustin had hardly dared imagine that day when he stumbled across Kate's camp, drawn by the smell of her cooking. He had a wife he loved desperately, 2 healthy children, meaningful work, and a place in a community that valued him. And he had Kate's cooking, meals so delicious and lovingly prepared that he genuinely did sometimes feel tears prick his eyes when he tasted them. Not from hunger now, but from gratitude for the extraordinary woman who had come into his life and transformed it completely. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the children were asleep, Dustin sat in the kitchen of their home watching Kate prepare bread dough for the next day. Her hands worked the dough with practiced efficiency, kneading and folding, and he marveled as always at the skill in those hands, the way they could transform simple ingredients into something that brought joy to everyone who tasted it. "What are you thinking about?" Kate asked, glancing up and catching him staring. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," he said honestly. "About that day I caught the smell of your cooking on the wind and followed it to your camp. About how different my life would be if I had ridden in a different direction, or if you had been 10 miles north or south. About all the tiny choices that led to us finding each other." She smiled, shaping the dough into a ball and placing it in a bowl to rise. "I think about that too sometimes. About what would have happened if I had stayed in Virginia City, or if you had not been tracking that horse thief, or if I had camped somewhere else that night. All the little moments that had to align perfectly for us to meet." "Do you believe in fate?" he asked. "I believe in food," she said, coming to sit beside him. "I believe in putting good things into the world and having faith that they will come back to you. I believe in working hard at what you love and being open to unexpected blessings. I believe in you, and I believe in us." "Is that the same as believing in fate?" "Maybe." He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I believe in you too. And I believe that your cooking could make a starving man cry with joy, and that I am blessed to eat it every single day for the rest of my life." She turned her head to kiss him softly. "You are not starving anymore." "No," he agreed. "But I still eat every meal you make like it is the best thing I have ever tasted, because it is. You have a gift, Kate. You bring happiness to people through your food, and you brought me happiness the moment I met you. That is magic, real and true." They sat there together in the warm kitchen, comfortable in the silence of deep understanding, and Dustin thought about all the meals they had shared over the years. The stew that first night, the breakfast that had made him realize what real cooking could be, the wedding feast and anniversary dinners, simple family suppers and elaborate restaurant dishes. Each one had been prepared with love, and each one had been received with genuine appreciation. In the years that followed, their family continued to grow. Another son arrived in 1887, named Matthew, followed by a second daughter, Sarah, in 1889. Kate managed to balance her growing family with running the restaurant, though she eventually hired a talented assistant to help manage the day-to-day operations so she could spend more time at home. The Golden Table continued to flourish, becoming an institution in Bozeman and beyond. Dustin worked his way up to become sheriff, taking over when Davis retired in 1890. He brought the same dedication to law enforcement that Kate brought to cooking, and together they became pillars of the Bozeman community. But despite their public roles and growing responsibilities, their private life remained centered around simple pleasures. Family dinners around their table, Sunday picnics in the mountains, quiet evenings by the fire when the children were asleep. As the century drew to a close and a new one began, they watched their children grow into capable, kind adults. Daniel went to college in the East to study agriculture, determined to bring modern farming techniques back to Montana. Elizabeth showed her mother's talent for cooking and eventually took over management of the Golden Table. Matthew became a teacher, and Sarah married a local rancher and started a family of her own. Through it all, through the changing times and growing family and the inevitable challenges that came with life on the frontier, one thing remained constant: Dustin's absolute devotion to Kate's cooking. He continued to eat every meal she prepared with genuine reverence and joy, praising her efforts, requesting favorites, trying new dishes with enthusiasm. He told her regularly that her cooking could make a starving man cry with joy, and she would laugh and kiss him and say he was biased. "Of course I am biased," he would reply. "I have been in love with you and your cooking for over 20 years. That does not make it less true." On their 25th anniversary, in 1904, their children organized a celebration at the Golden Table, inviting everyone who had been part of their lives over the years. The restaurant was packed with friends and neighbors, former colleagues and current community members, all gathered to honor the couple who had given so much to Bozeman. Elizabeth had worked with her mother to create a menu that featured some of Kate's most beloved dishes from over the years. The venison stew that had first brought Dustin to her campfire, the roasted chicken from her first night cooking at Mrs. Henderson's hotel, the pot roast from the evening Dustin had proposed, and a dozen other dishes each tied to a specific memory. As each course was served, someone would stand and share a story about Kate's cooking or about the couple themselves, and the room would fill with laughter and sometimes tears. When it came time for Dustin to speak, he stood with Kate beside him, his arm around her waist, and looked out at all the faces turned toward them. "Most of you know that I met my wife because I was starving and followed the smell of her cooking. What you might not know is that I have remained starving every day since, not for food but for her presence in my life. Kate feeds more than bodies. She feeds souls. Her cooking is an act of love, and I have been the grateful recipient of that love for 25 extraordinary years." He turned to look at her, seeing silver now mixed with the gold in her hair, fine lines around her eyes from years of laughter, the small burned scar on her wrist from an oven accident last year. She was more beautiful to him now than she had been that first evening in the firelight, made even lovelier by time and shared experiences. "I've told you countless times that your cooking could make a starving man cry with joy," he continued, speaking directly to her now. "And I have eaten every single meal you have ever prepared for me like it was the best thing I ever tasted, because it was and is. You brought joy into my life through your food and through your love, and I am grateful every single day that I was hungry enough and lucky enough to find you. Happy anniversary, my love. Here is to 25 more years of your extraordinary cooking and our extraordinary life together." The room erupted in applause, and Kate pulled him down for a kiss that was both sweet and passionate, not caring that they had an audience. When they finally broke apart, she was crying, but smiling through the tears. "I love you," she whispered. "Thank you for appreciating what I do, for never taking it for granted, for making me feel valued and seen." "I love you too," he whispered back. "Thank you for feeding me, body and soul, for all these years." They lived many more years together, watching their grandchildren grow, seeing Bozeman transform from a frontier town into a thriving city, adapting to the changes that came with the new century while holding fast to the values that had always guided them. Kate continued cooking almost until the end, her hands still steady and sure even when her back ached and her feet grew tired. She passed away peacefully in 1918, surrounded by her family, and Dustin held her hand and told her one last time that her cooking had made this starving man cry with joy. He outlived her by only 3 years, seeming to lose his purpose when she was gone. Oh, he loved his children and grandchildren fiercely, and he remained engaged with the community he had served for so long. But something essential had left him when Kate died, and everyone could see it. He ate the meals his daughters prepared for him, and they were good, but they never inspired the same reverence that Kate's cooking had. It was not just about the food, they realized. It was about the love between them, the way Kate had poured herself into every meal she made for him, and the way he had received those meals as the precious gifts they were. When Dustin died in his sleep in 1921, the whole town mourned. The funeral was held at the church, but the gathering afterward was at the Golden Table, still operated by the family, still maintaining Kate's exacting standards. Elizabeth prepared her father's favorite meal, the venison stew her mother had first made all those years ago. And as people ate, they shared stories about the remarkable couple who had loved each other so completely. He always ate like every meal was the best he had ever had, one old-timer recalled, smiling through his tears. Never saw a man appreciate food the way Marshall Yates appreciated Miss Kate's cooking. It was love, pure and simple. She could make a starving man cry with joy, another added. And he was that starving man, even after he was full, even after decades of marriage. Some people never learn to appreciate what they have, but those two appreciated each other every single day. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the restaurant that still bore Kate's vision and standards, in the countless people whose lives they had touched over the years. But perhaps most importantly, they lived on in the story of how they met and fell in love, a tale that was told and retold throughout Montana Territory and beyond, about the woman whose cooking could make a starving man cry with joy, and the cowboy who ate every meal she made like it was the best thing he had ever tasted, because it was, and because he loved her with every fiber of his being. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave this earth, Dustin and Kate were together again, and she was cooking, and he was eating with that same expression of reverent joy he had worn for over 40 years, because some things are eternal. Love, devotion, and the simple, profound act of feeding someone you cherish with everything you have to give.